Dallas Cowboys running back Ronald Jones is officially suspended for the first 2 weeks of the season. How much does that hurt the Cowboys moving forward? All that and more this episode of Locked On Cowboys Podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, out in Oxnard, California, it's Landon McCool. Follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Just a reminder to everybody, we're doing 2 shows every single day, all week long, as the Cowboys ramp up practice. They've got their second padded practice today. But Landon, before we even get to practice notes and all that kind of stuff, we've got some actual news. Ronald Jones suspended for the first 2 games of the season due to a PED. I think it was a failed test.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I think he increased his chances of making the team.
Which is strange, right?
I think, yeah. I mean, honestly, you and I have been talking about the fact that Ronald Jones seemed kind of extraneous on the team for a long time and more of an insurance policy at the running back position because we like a lot of the other guys that they have on this roster. And I think the Cowboys do too. And we'll talk about those guys in a sec. But I think for Ronald, he is a veteran guy that I clearly, like I said, signed for some insurance purposes. The fact that he is going to be suspended for 2 games, the first 2 games of the season, means that he's eligible to be put on the suspended list, which is a list that takes him off of the 53-man roster, but keeps him inside your building. And so suddenly the Cowboys have a way to kind of stash a running back for two weeks if they want to, and still be able to kind of hold on to his veteran presence if something were to happen to the other running backs that they are going to have in the mix there in the running back room starting week 1.
Yeah, this very much feels like a situation where he was 50-50 to make the roster anyways. But now that you get him past the first 2 weeks and you don't have to worry about anybody stealing him, he actually might have more value to the Cowboys now, which again, I know sounds incredibly strange. But one of the reasons why this just isn't a big deal to me and why I'm not pushing the panic button, and I know that you feel the same way, is because he wasn't RB2. He might not have even been RB3 on this team. It just felt like he was kind of buried on the roster, and now his chance of actually playing probably is a little bit higher.
I mean, he's a veteran running back who you're not expecting necessarily to play special teams. He wasn't dynamic. He didn't really bring a ton to the running back room. I mean, just as a running back. Yeah. So the odds of him making the team and being on the game day roster felt very slim. But now that you can kind of protect him and still hold on to his services without having to cut Malik Davis or Rico Dowdle, I think makes it him a lot more valuable, much more viable player for the Cowboys in season. So
I wonder how much run he's going to get in the preseason now, because he's still eligible to practice and be in the preseason. Like, are we just going to see him in that 3rd game get like 30 touches, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all depends on exactly where we are in the running back 2 battle, right? And I also think that, look, after having lost Rico 2 consecutive off seasons in a row to injury, they may get to a point where they may not. I mean, where Rico Dowdle is the guy that they're protecting from injury as we get closer to the preseason. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out, honestly.
All right. I want to talk about that RB2 spot because I sent out a tweet this morning that I think Malik Davis is the clear-cut number 2 running back behind Tony Pollard. I think he's going to be the guy that gets, 7 to 9 touches every game, kind of spelling Pollard. I know that you disagree with that. What are your thoughts on the RB2 position here?
I think it's Dowdle. I mean, I like Malik Davis a lot, and I picked Dowdle over Malik Davis last year, and I think, I don't know if that was correct or not, because I think Dowdle got injured and then Davis basically took the job at that point. I think it's a great competition. I like both of them. Let me be clear.
So do I.
I think for me, Dowdle gives you a bit more of a physical presence. I think he's a bigger, a little stronger, a little bit faster guy. He has a little bit better athletic profile. He struggled to kind of stay on the field, and despite having got, I think, 2 years on Malik Davis in the league, he probably isn't too much further along, just because Malik Davis may have seen more time in an NFL game than Rico has. So I do think it's going to be an interesting competition. And I think that for me, I would probably go with Rico simply because I think he gives you a little bit more power, a little bit more athleticism, dynamism to the game. And I think Davis is a very good all-around, like a very skilled all-around back with not bad athletic traits, just not exceptional ones. I think Dowdle, we forget is a really incredible athlete for his size.
I just wonder if Dowdle is more going to be like that third back, the utility guy that can play special teams, that can be, because he's got some size. Like, you could legitimately use him as a fullback in certain packages if you wanted to. And maybe there's just not a clear-cut RB2 on this team. Maybe it's Pollard, and then everybody else has a role. Whether it's Deuce Vaughn as kind of your space back, it's Davis as your do everything back, and Dowdle as somebody who gives you a little bit more size. I wonder if that's how the Cowboys are viewing this running back situation, rather than here's our number 1, here's our number 2, here's our number 3.
I also think it depends on how many tight ends they're keeping and what the plan is with Hunter Lupke. I mean, all these things are going to factor into exactly how they're going to construct this room, and whether they can afford to have a luxury like having Dowdle, Davis, and Vaughn all in the backfield behind Pollard. That may be more than they can handle. Or maybe they plan on loading up the position and including Lupke and maybe going short at other spots. It's going to be tough to say, but the Cowboys are going to start running into a numbers problem here pretty soon. And so they can't continue to solve the running back solution with having 5 running backs in the room. No. They're going to have to figure that out at some point.
Well, and let's look at how the Cowboys did this last year. They kept 4 tight ends, right? Dalton Schultz, Jake Ferguson, Peyton Hendershot, Sean McEwen. Sean McEwen played a lot of fullback last year. And you mentioned yesterday on the podcast that McEwen's been doing a lot of the fullback stuff, in training camp so far. And then they kept 3 running backs. It was Ezekiel Elliott, Tony Pollard, and Malik Davis. The way that I'm looking at this is they're probably only going to keep 7 total players from those 2 positions combined. Would you agree?
Between tight end and running back?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there could be the potential for them to keep an 8th one if the 8th one is Lupke, because you feel like you can get some crossover there. But you definitely need, if you're going to keep an 8th one, you're definitely going to need heavy special teams contributions from that group. I
don't see Lupke and Dowdle both making the team, right? Assuming Malik Davis makes the team as well.
I think that Dowdle and Davis are more in direct competition to me, because I think that Lupke is he's a running back for sure, but I think that his value is that he can give you so many other in-game snaps that I think even Dowdle probably couldn't do. So I don't know. It's interesting. Maybe they can convince themselves that Dowdle can do some of that and that he's that guy. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. I think Dowdle to me is still more of a running back, and to me Lupke is more
of a fullback.
Super back is what we were calling him yesterday,
super
right?
Back.
That's what they call those guys, right? Those kind of, what was that guy from Northwestern that came out a couple of years ago? Evan, I can't remember his last name, but there's these guys that are like the 235.
Evan Hall, I think it was.
Yeah, I think that's right. There's the 235, 240 pound running backs that come into the league and then do a little bit more than just playing running back, right? And I think that's kind of what that role is I'm looking for.
What's going to make this even more complicated is how many receivers do they keep? Because we know they like Jalen Scott, who's playing really well. Jalen Tolbert's playing well. Kavontae Turpin, we've been seeing used more on offense. Simi Fehoko has some size and speed that, frankly, the rest of the receivers don't have. So can they really afford to keep 7 receivers and 4 running backs and 4 tight ends? I got to assume the answer is probably no.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't mention Moreno Cropper, who's had very good weeks previously. I mean, I think him and Brooks, really, you have to figure out if maybe they're competing for one spot, or maybe
spot at all.
Spot at all. I mean, that's the thing, right? Is I think that they just kind of have to keep their heads down at this point and see what's available by the time training camp's over, and see if there's even spots to be had that far down the roster. Because again, like, for the reasons that we just discussed, there's going to be a numbers problem across this roster, and so you have to think about, this is a defense that's already going to probably keep more than their share of numbers on that side, because they rotate guys and they have so much talent on that side. So the Cowboys offense may be short, on some of the numbers. And so the Cowboys may need to find, roster mechanisms to try to stash some of these guys so that they can still make them available. Find a way to get a Moreno Cropper onto your practice squad, or find a way to get one of these guys onto your practice squad so you can call them up a couple times. And then maybe as someone gets hurt, you pull them onto the 53-man roster so you protect them fully. So that's really the kind of thing that we need to kind of start, wrapping our brains around, who are these kind of, borderline rosterable players that you feel like are playing well enough in camp that maybe they can be useful during the regular season, but they're not so useful that they won't make it through waivers and be able to be put on one of your lists. Like, this is the kind of thing that we should be looking for for the Jalen Brookses, for the Moreno Croppers, for the Princeton Fants of the team that maybe have shown you a little bit something, not quite enough to make the team, but how do we find a way to retain these guys without putting them on the 53-man roster?
You mentioned the defense. The Cowboys had two pretty big name players miss practice yesterday with injuries. We will talk about that next. This episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. At eBay Motors, we have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a draft or you're scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you the players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So with draft prep underway for the upcoming season, let's see who Vinny has picked out for us in this week's eBay Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Pick of the Week. This week, it's a player that you should know well. It's Tony Pollard. Are you looking to park an elite running back in your fantasy football garage after the top half dozen options after the position have been taken off? You can still find a sleek ride in Tony Pollard now that he is the unquestioned feature back in the Cowboys offense after his breakout 2022 season. Without Ezekiel Elliott, Pollard's speed and acceleration will allow him to dominate key touches and a strong rushing attack. Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. The same for your vehicle. With eBay Guaranteed Fit and over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right at your fingertips, you can make sure that your ride stays running smoothly. Air filters, brakes, batteries, taillights, alternators, shocks, struts, you name it, eBay Motors has it, and they'll make sure it's the right fit for your car, because eBay Guaranteed Fit helps you understand exactly what part you need for your vehicle the first time. So go forth, switch gears, crank the AC, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up, because now you know you'll always be set up for success from the get-go. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. And let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, Landon, we saw yesterday Dorance Armstrong was dealing with a hamstring injury, did not practice. It doesn't seem like he's going to be that far away from getting back on the field. The bigger injury news was Sam Williams came out, did some special teams work at the beginning of the practice, left practice with a shoulder strain. Now, the severity, we don't know yet. We don't know how long he's going to be out. But the Cowboys have a lot of depth at the edge rusher spot. They're going through it pretty quickly now with Armstrong and Sam Williams out of the lineup.
Yeah, I saw Sam leave the field. He didn't seem, he wasn't like being carted off. He didn't seem to be leaving with a bunch of urgency. He actually stopped halfway across the field and chatted with somebody for a little while. So I think his situation, they're describing it as a strain. That to me sounds like pretty straightforward, hopefully non-long-term injury. Should be good to go.
It's just a bummer for him, because this should have been a big camp for him, like to really take hold of that third defensive end spot.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe he's back in 2 days. But yeah, it sucks that he's missing any time at this point, honestly.
But at the same time, we know this training staff and the coaching staff is going to be very, very cautious, right? They know The goal is to have these guys ready not only for week 1 but for the rest of the season. So
Yeah.
if it's a 3-day injury, it's probably going to end up being like a week and a half absence.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the same goes for a guy like McQuamu. I saw him out there yesterday on the cords. He seemed to be moving fine, and just dealing with the situation. And they're just going to take that whole situation very carefully and just give them all the time they need to kind of work through that. I'm trying to think about who else was out there. Jordan Lewis was out there on the cords. I think both Jordan Lewis and Schoonmaker. I mean, it's hard to say with. Well, I think probably it's the truth. I think both of them look like they're physically ready to practice. I think it's a pain tolerance issue.
Well, so Jordan Lewis had the Liz Frank injury, which is a foot injury.
Yep.
Luke Schoonmaker has the plantar fasciitis, which is another pain tolerance issue more than anything. They're probably just trying to work them up to their conditioning level before anything else, right?
They were working 3 times as hard as anybody else on that field, without a doubt. I mean, not that they weren't working hard, but Britt Brown works those. I mean, they basically run the entire length of the practice while other guys are taking breaks and stuff. So they don't get a break just because they're with Britt Brown at all.
Yeah. Now, the only, I don't even want to say positive, but the only good thing that comes out of some of these injuries is you get some depth players that get more snaps. And like for the case for the defensive ends, I mean, we don't need to see Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence and Dante Fowler. Like we know what those guys are.
We've seen quite a bit of those guys already.
We've seen quite a bit of them. But this opens up opportunities for players like Isaiah Land, who, is a small school edge rusher, or Tyrus Wheat. And then, at safety, we talked about Tyler Coyle. We talked about Marquise Bell, Wande Thomas, who actually got a little bit nicked up on yesterday's practice. It's a good time for these guys to get a lot of reps during the early portions of padded practice.
Yeah, and the kind of down roster guys that this season's versions of Sam Williams and those guys that are younger players that are going to start seeing playing time. They're getting their opportunities right now because of these injuries. They're getting a chance to get more snaps, and Sheldon Redwine and Wanye Thomas, like you mentioned, getting more snaps with the safeties injured. And we're seeing a little bit more Fahoku at the defensive end, and we're seeing Ben Bangu, or however to say his name is, Bangu, out at defensive end. So you're getting an opportunity to kind of see some of these other guys mix in. And get a chance to play with the ones and play maybe a little bit over their heads, but that's how you get them elevated, right? Is you get them reps against better competition, and they learn how to step up. And that's kind of like you mentioned, the positive that can come out of this, and much in the way that Trayvon Diggs, who, again, like, just to kind of reiterate, is only slightly injured, I would say. Like every single day I've been out there, he's been fully dressed out, fully warming up with the DBs. And then when it comes to actually doing reps, he just kind of steps to the side.
And I don't even know if you'd call him injured. He's probably he's a little hurt, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's a difference. Like, if the Cowboys were playing a game on Sunday, do you have any doubt that Trayvon would play?
No doubt he would be, and he played fine too, I would think. I saw him running. I saw him. That's the thing, is that whenever they get excited about a play being made, it really belies their injury status, because you see them sprinting down the field, celebrating. So and again, like, it gives great opportunity for guys like that. Situation gives a great opportunity for someone like Nashawn Wright and for Kelvin Joseph and all of the down rosters, Eric Scott, to get an opportunity to get on the field and get some reps and get some higher competition, and that's how the bottom of your roster gets better.
Last thing before we move on to padded practice number 2, Ben Bagnew wearing number 94 just looks wrong. That needs to be like a super long, bendy pass rusher, right?
It really was screwing up a bunch of people in practice. I definitely noticed in the stands several different people going, "Wait, who's 94?" And then just kind of looking and trying to figure out who it was. Yeah, it was. That's the funny thing about going to a bunch of these. You associate numbers with people, and especially numbers like 94, 22, 8, 88, all those. And so like you're constantly kind of comparing other guys who have seen that. And yeah, I mean, that's not really a fair comparison to someone like
I will
Jim
say
Duggan.
it's nice to have number 21 back in the secondary. It just feels right again, right?
Yeah, and he playing well too, very well. So
Gilmore.
it's good to see a decent number 21 back in the defensive backfield. That's for sure.
It hasn't been since what, Mike Jenkins, since we've had a number 21 at corner.
Yeah, and listen, Jenkins had a couple of good years. He was a Pro Bowler at one point. Yeah, so okay, yeah, that's fair.
All right, let's talk about what we're looking forward to seeing in today's practice next. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Everydayers, we're going to have a show later today live on YouTube. Shooting for 5 p.m. Eastern time, around there, just depending on when Lana gets back from traffic.
Yeah, don't worry, guys. I don't have to shower this time because they're going to have my water turned off. So it's going to be a little bit of a grimy two-a-day. That's okay. We're getting in after the grind. This is what we're used to. This is what 2 days are all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So make sure you're tuning in for that. Let's talk about that padded practice that you're going to go to later today. What are you the most excited to see?
Well, this one is going to be great because, we talk about it for folks that, want to know the nitty gritty about Oxnard, that the team is going to be practicing on the closer field to us this side. So we're going to have a lot better angles. I'm definitely going to be kind of doing a lot of the stuff that I wanted to kind of get over. I want to see more Mozzie Smith. I want to see more kind of intense line play while we get the opportunity to. Want to see what's going on at the guard position, seeing who's rotating in there once Tyler steps out of left guard, who's playing at right guard. We saw TJ Bass work into right guard yesterday, which was great to see with the first team, and left guard. Yeah. And so it was good to see him working with the first team and seeing what they've got. I think it starts with line play for me when the pads come on. I try to get a lot of the kind of getting a base, an overview of exactly what the wide receivers and defensive backs look like in the early practices without pads, because you can still kind of get a lot out of that. But now that the pads are on, I definitely want to see, offensive line, defensive line, linebackers, running backs, see how they're running. I didn't get a chance to see very much Deuce Vaughn yesterday, so I would like to see him.
It's just hard to see.
No, that's there's just a distance problem and a height. Yeah. So hopefully that, with him being a little bit closer, I get more of an opportunity to kind of see him carry the football, which was something I didn't get to see very much of yesterday.
For me, it's the linebackers, right? Like this is where the linebackers need to make their hay. Like, are the pads popping? I want to see how Overshawn, plays sideline to sideline. I want to see what Damone Clark looks like. Jabril Cox, Mike McCarthy talked him up a little bit in yesterday's press conference. I want to see how he looks in coverage, because that's where he's going to have to make his money for this team. Those 4 linebackers, including Leighton Vander Esch, I think today's a good day to see kind of where they're at and where that position is at as a whole.
We didn't talk about it yesterday, but I thought that going back and watching my practice tapes after we did that second pod, Leighton Vander Esch had a very good practice. He had a couple of different tackles for a loss. He's just looking in fine form, like as good as he has. So I just wanted to point that out, because he's another guy that, we kind of assume, there's a level of assumption there that he's going to be Leighton Vander Esch, and that's great. But, I think he may even have taking a step back towards that form that he was his rookie
he's just
year.
Further away from the neck surgery that he had right now. He had the little flare up last year with his neck, but I don't think he had to have any kind of surgery or anything that way. So it seems like this is probably the healthiest he's been in several years, knock on wood.
Yeah. And he looks good yesterday in the first padded practice. I'm excited to see him today as well.
All right. So make sure you guys are following Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. We're going to get updates all day long from Cowboys practice. Again, we're going to be back here on YouTube live at 5 p.m. Eastern time, or around there, just depending on when Landon gets back from the traffic. Make sure that you're downloading the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. You should follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Cowboys. I'm at Marcus _Mosier. We'll see you guys next time.